My name is Alina, and I hadn't heard from my father in 3 years. Not a single call, no texts. Not a happy birthday. Not even a cold-hearted hope you're well. Nothing. So when I saw his handwriting on that envelope, curved, deliberate, brutally familiar, my hands started shaking. It was a Tuesday morning. Cloudy, normal. I had just come back from walking my dog when I checked my mailbox, and there it was. Cream-colored, heavier than junk mail. My name written across the front like it still belonged to him. I froze right there on the porch. For a second, I actually thought it might be a mistake. Maybe some government thing. Maybe a legal letter. But my father was old school. He hated lawyers. Said they were only good for pulling families apart. I heard that a lot growing up, especially after Mom left him. I clutched the envelope and walked back inside. I didn't open it at first. I just stared at it on the kitchen table while I made coffee, convincing myself not to cry. I shouldn't have felt anything, but of course I did. This was the man who told me I was dead to him, who stood in our family's living room the last day I saw him and yelled, "Don't come crawling back when the world chews you up." I didn't crawl, but I bled. And now, what? A letter? After everything? When I finally opened it, I expected some short, dry note, maybe a formality, maybe guilt, but what I read was something different. It started with my name, but not how he used to say it. It was polite, distant, like someone writing to a stranger. "Alina, I hope this finds you in good health." There was no warmth, just carefully chosen words, almost like he'd run it through a spell checker for emotional grammar. He talked about the passage of time and life's unexpected turns. He said he'd been thinking of the past lately and hoped we could reconnect and speak as father and daughter again. But then, something felt off. The tone was too formal, too rehearsed, like a speech at a board meeting. This wasn't my father. Not really. He was cruel, sure, but he was never calculated. Not like this. Just before the last paragraph, something slipped. I believe it would be in both our best interest to resolve certain outstanding considerations in the spirit of mutual understanding. What? Outstanding considerations? Suddenly I flipped to the back. That's when I saw something tucked underneath the handwritten letter. Neatly stapled and typed, it was a legal document, a release form, with my name on it, and a blank space waiting, begging for my signature. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't an apology. It wasn't even about me. It was a setup. And then, as I held that form up to the light, I noticed something typed in very fine print, almost too fine to even see. But as I looked closer, I realized something was very off. It happened over a dinner that still haunts me, a heavy clinking of silverware kind of night, the kind where everyone speaks loudly about shallow things just to avoid addressing the rot underneath. We were at my aunt's house, which meant everything had to look perfect, no matter how broken it was beneath the surface. China plates, fake smiles, and uncomfortable pleasantries. But no matter how much effort was put into the centerpieces or tablecloths, you could feel the tension sitting beside you at the table like its own invited guest. My father was sitting across from me, tie tight, posture flawless, face carved out of granite, and beside him was the man he wanted me to marry. Let me rephrase that. The man he expected me to marry. Without question, without comment, I was 24, fresh out of grad school, figuring out my voice, earning my freedom, and I had already said no twice. What my father called disobedience, I just called a boundary. This man, this so-called suitor, was 38, recently divorced, obnoxiously controlling, and had once commented that women were prettier when they didn't talk too much. So, yes, I declined. But my father didn't take no as an answer. That night, when he brought the topic up again, I tried to keep my voice calm. I tried to explain, again, that I wasn't interested, that I didn't want to live a life that wasn't mine to choose. My mother, who'd found the courage to leave him years before, gave me a small nod from across the room, like a lifeline. My lifeline. But his face twisted like I'd just publicly spit on the family name. "After everything I've done for you," he said, raising his voice so the entire room hushed. "You dare to humiliate me? In front of family? Do you think you're smarter than me? Too good for the match I chose?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He stood, climbed emotionally higher with every word he hurled. You're not my daughter. Not anymore. I have no daughter who speaks against me. And then the plate, his plate, shattered as it slammed onto the ground. Guests gasped. Somewhere, a fork clinked and rolled. I stood up too, my cheeks burning, vision narrowing. No one spoke. Not one person. Not my uncle. Not my brother. Certainly not the woman he'd wanted me to marry that man and hand off like a parcel. They all just stared, eyes bouncing between us like spectators at some soap opera dinner theater. I remember every breath I took that night, like it scratched the inside of my ribs. What no one knew was that I'd already packed a bag. I'd already made arrangements with a friend. I'd already told my boss at the nonprofit I was looking for housing options near work. So I turned to my aunt and quietly said, "Thank you for the food," even though I hadn't touched a bite. And then I looked at him one last time. 3 seconds, that's all I gave him. 3 seconds of eye contact to memorize the man who once carried me on his shoulders at the beach, who used to say I was his little general because I was bossy even at 5. The same man who shrank into cruelty the moment I stopped. Oh, bang, and then I left. No. Screaming, no breakdown, just the door clicking behind. Me and the streetlight washing over my tired face as I walked into silence. I moved into a tiny apartment the next day and blocked his number. Blocked my brother's too, once I realized he was parroting my dad's anger back to me in messages like poison wrapped in duty. I kept going. I attended therapy. I scraped money together. I questioned my own worth every other day and still kept showing up. I was alone. But I was finally living without clutching at approval that came with conditions. That dinner, that was the last time I heard his voice. Until this letter arrived. My first month away from my family was brutal, not in some cinematic, tragic kind of way. It was painfully ordinary. I was tired all the time. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, took 2 buses to get to my temp job, ate granola bars for dinner, and told myself small things like, at least you're free, at least no one's yelling. But silence can be its own kind of hell when you've been raised to walk on eggshells just to avoid explosions. My studio apartment was barely 400 square feet and smelled like old paint and onions. Don't ask me why. I slept on a futon for the first 6 weeks, and I didn't own a single framed photo or plant. There wasn't space for comfort. I was surviving, not decorating. It was a strange existential shift. To live without threat. No lectures, no manipulative guilt dinners. Just me, my calendar, my god-awful overhead light. At night, I cried in such confusing relief, like my nervous system didn't trust the quiet. I started therapy on a sliding scale after week 7. Found a lady named Miriam who wore linen pants and never asked me to call her doctor anything. The first session, all I did was sob quietly while she passed the tissue box and said, "You've been trained to think love has to hurt to be real." That sentence cracked something open in me, because no one had ever put it so simply. Every affection I knew growing up had been transactional. If I got straight A's, I was praised, until the subject changed to how I still wasn't as obedient as cousin Ruhi. If I wore what he picked out, I got smiled at. If I said no, I got the Cold War. Miriam helped me name things. Emotional parentification, covert narcissism, the role of the scapegoat, whole psychologies I had just thought were normal family stuff. Each night after sessions, I'd come back to my little corner of almost home and open a notebook from the dollar store. I started writing short letters, one to my father, one to my 10-year-old self, one to my cousin who watched me cry in the bathroom the night of that dinner and said nothing, then poems. Simple ones, badly written, but honest. Truth on paper started becoming my ritual. Between my 2 jobs, temp office assistant and weekend dog walker, I didn't have time for much. But I had words. I had myself. That year, I didn't go to any birthdays. I skipped every wedding invite. Every family WhatsApp message remained unopened. I grieved people who were still alive, and I trained myself to stop apologizing for breathing. I wish I could say there was one magic moment. There wasn't. Healing is slow, uneventful. You wake up one day and realize your body doesn't tense up when you hear your dad's ringtone in the distance. You walk past a store where you once fought with your family and don't feel your chest cave in. You say no to someone small and it feels like growth, I built friendships. Guarded at first, but I let people in. One of those people bought me my first houseplant. It died in 2 weeks, but that wasn't the point. The point was, someone thought I was worth gifting something green. I cleaned apartments on Sundays for extra cash. A lawyer, a music teacher, an older woman named Lourdes who always left me snacks and once said, "Whoever hurt you will be forgotten long before you stop blooming." That sentence lived with me. I started sleeping. Real sleep, not panic dozing. I walked the long route back from shifts just to hear music in my headphones. I wasn't happy exactly, but I wasn't breaking every day either. And it was in that almost comfortable limbo, 3 years since I left him, that the envelope arrived. On a Tuesday, neatly sealed, hand-addressed, my dad's name in the upper corner like it had any right being there. I stared down at that letter like it had legs and might crawl right off the counter. It was so perfect. Too perfect. At first glance, the letter looked sincere. The handwriting, intentional. The paper, thicker than your average printer stock, like it wanted to be taken seriously. I remember thinking, is this real? I mean, after 3 years of nothing, was this my dad's version of an olive branch? I wanted to believe it. I really did. He wrote about reflection, about growing older, about wounds that only time and distance could soften. There was mention of past mistakes, without naming any. Words like mending, healing, family. I stopped after each paragraph, rereading parts like I was running a spell check on emotion. Is this grief or manipulation? Remorse or rehearsal? The sentences sounded right, but they didn't feel like him. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Not directly. Not even sideways. He said things like, "I regret how things unfolded," as if events had just occurred, without any human steering the wheel. He talked around the pain like too much light would make it real. Still, a small part of me ached, hoped. Maybe this was progress. Maybe people could change, especially when age and time thinned their armor. But then, as I flipped past the second page, the final paragraph concluding with, "I hope we might meet again when your heart is ready," something stopped me. There was a third page, tucked just slightly too tight behind the others, like it hadn't meant to be obvious. This one wasn't handwritten. It was typed and notarized. There was my full name, first, middle, last, spelled correctly, which already made my stomach twist. Most people skip the middle name, but not on legal documents. The heading read, "Mutual Agreement for Relinquishment of Potential Property Interest." My throat went dry. The paragraphs were dense, crowded with words like designee, executor expectations, and retroactive acknowledgement of intent. Most of it was drowned in legalese, but I recognized enough to feel the slow throb of anxiety begin. This wasn't an apology. This wasn't even about me. This was about property. At the very bottom, just above a signature line, was a quiet request for my agreement. Signing it would, in no uncertain terms, forfeit me from any contestation or expectation involving the subject properties listed within the will of his name. Bolded. There was space to date it, space to print my name. One small checkbox. I waive all claims without coercion. Just like that. 3 years of silence wrapped in the illusion of parental regret. And it came with a trapdoor. I felt like vomiting. I flipped the pages again, hoping I missed something, some real explanation. A line where he said he wanted to talk in person. A confession. Anything. But no, just curated humility at the front and legal strategy at the back. At that moment, the emotional flood I'd held back started to seep through. I wasn't just hurt. I was insulted. He didn't miss me. He wanted my absence to serve him. He expected silence not just from my mouth, but from my signature. He wanted to use my distance as proof that I didn't care, didn't want, didn't belong. That letter wasn't reconciliation. It was a calculation. And the worst part? If I'd still been in the headspace I was 3 years ago, if I hadn't done the work, gone to therapy, found my spine, I might have signed it. Out of guilt, out of misplaced shame, out of hope that maybe that would bring us back together. But now I could read between every line. And one question echoed so loudly in my skull I couldn't ignore it. Why would reconciliation require a signature? I didn't sleep that night. I kept that letter on the kitchen table under a chipped mug like it might blow away if I didn't weigh it down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared, and when the nausea finally gave way to clarity, I knew exactly who I had to call. Her name was Tara. We'd met in college, back when I still believed my life was headed in some safe, predictable direction. We hadn't talked much over the past few years, but I knew she was working at a law office a few towns over as a paralegal. If there was one person who could tell me what this letter actually meant, it was her. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, stranger," she said, cheerful and casual. But then, like she could hear something in my silence, her tone shifted. "Alina, are you okay?" I wasn't, but I would be. "I need a favor," I said. A legal pair of eyes. 15 hours later, I was sitting on her cluttered apartment floor, a file folder in my lap and panic twisted in my chest. Tara wore flannel pajamas and no makeup, bless her heart, and yet looked more capable than anyone I'd seen in months. She read the letter, slowly, then the second page. She skimmed the third page twice, then a third time. "So," she said, dragging the word out while already reaching for a pen and paper. "This is not a reconciliation letter. This is a release form." I nodded, arms crossed so tight it felt like they might snap. She pointed to the typed sections. "It's written in a way that makes it look friendly, but it's legally binding. If you sign this, you're waiving your right to anything he owns now or in the future, specifically real estate." My stomach sank like someone had dropped a brick in it. "But I'm not even written into his will," I said. "He disowned me." Tara's expression didn't change. "That's the trick. If you're not in the will, but you could contest it due to family ties or verbal promises made in the past, like, say, trusteeship, cohabitation, or unpaid contribution to property, you're still a potential dispute. It's rare, but it holds up when there's proof." I blinked. My head was spinning, but one thing felt unnervingly clear. He was about to sell something, and he wanted to make very sure I never came back to claim a piece of it. "You said unpaid contribution?" I asked slowly. "Yeah," she said. "If you helped invest time or labor into the property, especially without compensation or living rent-free, it can get messy if you sue." I laughed, harsh and bitter. "I helped him renovate the beach house for 3 summers. Painted every fence post, sanded every windowsill. I planted lemon trees in the backyard. He used to joke they'd be Alina's lemons when I had my own kids. Now he was scrubbing my name from the deed. No call. No conversation. Just a polite little signature slot for me to agree I never mattered." Tara pushed the papers back toward me. "Don't sign this. And don't say a damn word to him. He's baiting a quiet exit. Disappear now and he owns the ending to your story." That was the moment it landed in my gut like steel. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a shovel. And my father wasn't trying to reconnect. He was trying to bury me. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just being used. I was being erased. There were 2 summers that defined my teenage years. Not because of who I became, but because of what I gave. The beach house wasn't some glamorous estate by the ocean. It was more like an aging 2-story rental near the coast, passed down from my grandmother and constantly in need of repairs. It had termites, warped floorboards, leaky windows, a broken fence, and an ugly peach-colored porch that my father swore he'd fix someday. That someday became mine. From the age of 15, it was clear. While other kids my age were working part-time scooping ice cream or going on family vacations, I was hauling paint cans up and down a staircase in 100-degree heat. My father framed it as responsibility. "It builds character," he said every time I tried to complain. "Real families invest in legacy," so I believed it. I wanted to believe in legacy. That if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe I'd be seen. When I mowed the lawn every weekend without being asked, he said, "This'll all come back around, my girl." When I scraped the walls of the guest room clean of mildew that summer, gagging quietly, tears welling, I remember him standing in the doorway, arms crossed like a proud contractor. "You're earning your corner of this house," he said. It felt like approval, like belonging. even when I was sore and blistered from laying old floor tile with my own hands. I told myself the pain had purpose, because he said, even once, even in front of my brother, someday, when this place is yours, you'll remember how much love you put into it. Yours. He said it out loud, like a promise someone might actually mean. And stupid, loyal, hopeful me, I believed him. He never paid me. Not a single cent toward college. But I still drove back every weekend I could during undergrad to help get it ready, when he said, we might rent it out someday. Make good money. I was painting baseboards while my friends were doing internships, because deep down, I thought I was building something with him. Now, I saw it clearly. I was building something for him, and now, years later, he wanted to sell it in silence. Swipe my name clean from the memory of that house. It wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation camouflaged as legacy. But this time, he miscalculated. See, he thought I wouldn't remember. But I did. I remembered every summer chore, every late-night run for extra paint, every picture I took on my cracked iPhone, when I stood barefoot in the grass and showed Mom the before and after of that fence I stained by myself. I remembered the lemon trees, the birthday he forgot entirely, because I was on my knees cleaning rat droppings out of the shed, the time my shoes dissolved from bleach damage, and I had to walk home with garbage bags tied around my ankles. And unlike the early years, when I didn't have proof, now, I had photos, emails, even texts from him, saying things like, this'll be all yours one day if you don't screw it up, so no. He didn't just pick the wrong time to send that release form. He picked the wrong version of me. Because this version, I don't just remember, I have receipts. There's one person in my family my father hated almost as much as he ended up hating me. Her name's Samira, my cousin. Technically my mom's niece, but we always called each other cousins because anything closer felt too painful. Samira was the first person who ever stood up to my father and didn't flinch. She dropped out of med school after one semester, dyed her hair lavender, and moved 3 states away to start selling tiny homes to people who want peace, not pretense. His words, not hers. The last time I saw her at a family function, she wore boots to a wedding and brought a date who introduced himself as a digital chakra realignment coach. I thought she was wild. He thought she was dangerous, and because she never kissed the ring, she'd been unofficially exiled, just like me. I found her number buried in an old group chat from years ago. Sent a simple text that read, "Hey, weird question. Can we talk about the beach house?" She replied in 2 minutes, "You bring coffee. I'll bring the unholy truth." We met at a little courtyard cafe where no one looked twice at misfits. She hadn't changed. Still bold silver earrings, still eyeliner like armor, still laughing like it was her only weapon. After a hug that lasted one breath too long, I handed her the letter. She scanned it once, then again slowly. "Well, he's consistent," she said. "Weaponized guilt, followed by a dry-cleaned legal shiv," I laughed. "First time in days." It lasted half a second. "What do you know about the house?" I asked. Samira raised an eyebrow. Then, without skipping a beat, she pulled out her phone and opened a folder titled Hollow Hill LLC. Apparently, she got into real estate 2 years ago and had recently helped research zoning for new properties near the coast. Guess whose name popped up? My dad had transferred the beach house's ownership to a holding trust under a shell company. Hollow Hill LLC. Sounded normal enough. Until she clicked deeper. The trustee, a man named Ellis Grayson. "Sounds fake," I said. "Because it is," she replied. "Your dad forged some of the trustee paperwork. He put the property under Ellis the same day he created the company. And guess what?" She turned the screen so I could see the signature line. "My brother's name, sloppily printed. He's using your brother's middle name as the legal identity and posing him as a board member of the trust. This isn't just shady, it's panicked." I sat back, heart hammering, like it didn't know whether to race or stop. "He's trying to sell it without triggering any family flag or needing multiple heirs to weigh in," Samira explained. "That release form he sent you? It's just insurance. He wants to slip this through before anyone notices." "And if I sign it?" I asked. "He gets to liquidate the property cleanly. No contestation, no record. You're scrubbed from the narrative. He makes the sale through a blind trust and poof, legacy secured. No questions asked, I stared at the phone, then at the letter on the table between us. He really thought no one would know, that I wouldn't see it, wouldn't check. It wouldn't matter. But he forgot about Samira. He forgot about the girl he once called a disgrace, who now understood contracts better than he ever would. He underestimated the power of two black sheep with nothing left to lose and more facts than fear. You in? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Samira grinned. Oh, I've been waiting for someone to let me blow up a trust fund scheme. Let's burn this respectfully, then publicly. So I made a plan, not just with proof, not just with dignity, but with someone he'd never suspect. I didn't sign the letter. I didn't call him, didn't text, didn't give him the closure he expected, or the silence he could weaponize. Instead, I made him listen. He just didn't know it was coming every year. There's a charity gala in the city, some fancy event with champagne towers, auction paddles, and people who smile with their teeth but not their eyes. It's all photos and PR, but their checkbooks are real. My father never misses it. He doesn't care about the cause. He cares about the camera flashes, the handshakes, the illusion of goodwill. This year's host? A woman named Mrs. Caldwell, Grace Caldwell, my late mother's closest friend. The only person from their world who still sent me birthday cards after the fallout. When I reached out to her, nervous, unsure, she replied in a voice note that said, "If you're ready to use your voice, darling, I'll make sure they have to listen." She gave me 3 minutes. During the dinner portion, right before dessert and the pledge cards. 3 minutes isn't long, but if you use the right words, it's more than enough to make a man choke on his steak. I wore my mother's pendant that night, the one she gave me before she left him, before her body gave out and her softness became memory. The ballroom was everything I remembered it to be. Crystal lighting, white linens, and blood-thin laughter bouncing off ceilings. I stepped up to the mic when called, introduced only as a young woman writing about healing and legacy. No one knew what I was going to say, except me, and Samira, and Grace, who raised her glass in my direction like a signal. I opened my folder, cleared my throat, and began. This is a love letter dressed up in apology, polished, perfumed, a peace offering made of sugar and sharp edges. It starts with a name, mine of course, because control is always polite at first. It says, "I hope this finds you in good health." Health? Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." Just a passive hope, tucked into pleasantries, hiding something colder beneath. Some people chuckled lightly. They thought it was creative fiction. A performance piece. Spoken word, until I turned the page. My father sent me this letter after 3 years of silence, 3 years after disowning, me in a room full of people who watched and said nothing. 3 years after telling me I was no longer his daughter, and yet, poof, look how love returns, when land becomes leverage. A ripple went through the center tables. I had their attention now. My hands didn't shake. I'd practiced too many times. The woman who stood on stage that night wasn't the girl who cried on a futon in a 400-square-foot apartment. She was measured, focused, surgical. I read excerpts straight from the real letter, verbatim, even quoted that one line. I believe it would be in both our best interests. I paused. Let it echo. Then I unfolded the notarized third page. Gasps broke through the crowd when I read aloud the clause that required me to waive my rights. When I explained what it meant, what he'd done, how he'd tried to bury my existence under legal ink and disarming language, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse with rage. I spoke, like I was reading Sunday scripture. Calm. I let the cruelty speak for itself, and in that silence, the truth did what it does best. It leveled the room. I finished with a final line of my own. Legacy is not what you pass down. It's what you try to erase and fail. 2. Because voices don't die just because they were told to be quiet. Mine didn't, and I'm done pretending. It ever should have. Applause. Wasn't immediate. It started like hesitant rain, then surged like thunder. I stepped down before they stood. I didn't want the ovation. That wasn't the point. The point was, my father was sitting at table 6, between a tax attorney and a tech investor's wife. Red face, frozen hands. Everyone near him whispering with covered mouths, eyes darting between him and the papers I left behind. On the podium, he didn't come after me, didn't say a word, didn't make a scene, because there was nothing to say. Everything was already too loud, and my father, he just stood there speechless for once. I turned my phone off for 6 days, not just on silent, off. Not a single call, text, or notification. Let the dust settle without me. I didn't need to watch it unfold. I knew it would. That's the thing about truth. Once it's out, it does the work for you. The morning after the gala, I went to the lake near my apartment and sat on a crumbling bench with a cup of weak gas station coffee. The air smelled like damp pine and something sweet blooming nearby. It felt quiet, but not hollow. For once, the quiet belonged to me. The messages started piling up on day 2. I didn't read any of them, but I saw the names, my brother, my aunt, even 2 cousins who hadn't spoken to me since I broke the family. And of course, my father. 8 missed calls, 1 voicemail I never opened. The subject line in the transcription preview simply read, "We need to set things straight." No, we didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I was straight with myself, upright, unmoved. By day 4, my cousin Samira texted in all caps, "You broke the patriarchy at the buffet table," then followed it up with, "Also, guess what? Your dad's house sale just got paused." The zoning lawyer flagged something off in the paperwork. They're reviewing the Hollow Hill Trust documents. Investigation might follow. I didn't ask for that outcome. I didn't need it to feel vindicated. But when justice decides to catch up, I don't tell it to walk slower. It was surreal, becoming someone they couldn't look away from. For so long, I'd been treated like the flake, the rebel, the one who couldn't handle how family works. They painted me as the ungrateful child, the one who abandoned tradition, the one who made things difficult. But now, I was the quiet voice that had cut through the noise. The scapegoat had grown teeth and used truth like a scalpel. Some of my cousins reposted the clip of my speech. Strangers DM'd me. Women I'd barely known from school reached out to say they wished they had done what I did. That they stayed silent too long. That they felt seen. My silence used to keep me invisible. Now it made me untouchable. I wasn't naive. I knew resentment would follow eventually. My father, my brother, they weren't going to roll over and change. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Power had shifted, and not because I screamed the loudest, because for once I didn't explain myself to anyone. I revealed the truth and let it live in the air around them. But justice wasn't the only closure I wanted. There was something deeper, older, still beating at the core of what all of this had cost me. 2 years ago, late on a Wednesday night after therapy, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. Miriam, my therapist, had suggested it. I was spiraling that day, caught in a loop of what-ifs and unfinished sentences I wished I'd said to my father before the silence swallowed everything. She told me, "Close the loop on paper. Say the truth with no audience." So I wrote. It was on ruled notebook paper, in black ink. 3 pages, no edits, no apologies, just truth. Raw and trembling and mine. "Dear Dad, you confuse love with loyalty and made me pay the price every time I chose myself. I spent years trying to earn tenderness from you. Like love was a job performance score I just couldn't crack. And every time I stood up for myself, you took it as betrayal. You didn't punish me for being wrong. You punished me for not submitting. You tried to own me with silence, with shame, with debt, disguised as duty. And I let you, for a long time. Because I thought that's what daughters were supposed to do. But I need you to know something. Something I never had the courage to say out loud. I loved you anyway." Writing that part broke me, because it was true. I did love him. That's the part that nobody ever understands when they hear stories like mine. When you grow up being emotionally managed, you don't know it's abuse. You think it's your fault that the warmth comes in waves. That affection has rules. that eye contact is conditional. It took years for me to separate love from fear, and by the end of that letter, I wasn't angry. I was empty. But it was a good kind of empty. The kind that made room for new things. I folded that letter quietly, slid it into an unmarked envelope, and tucked it into the back of one of my old journals. Never mailed it, never reread it, until the night after the gala. That night, I found it again while cleaning, and I read it, end to end, sitting on my bedroom floor with my knees pressed to my chest, crying not because I was sad, but because I survived him. I survived the need for his approval. I survived the version of me that whispered, maybe if I was just quieter, smaller, more agreeable. And when I finished reading it, I realized something I hadn't felt at the gala. Peace. Because justice is sweet. But peace is anchoring. The day I stood on stage, reading his letter aloud, I didn't need revenge. I just needed the whole room, and him, to face what he assumed would stay hidden. And here's the thing, that still makes me smile. That letter I never mailed, the one filled with all the words he'd never let me say, he heard them anyway. Not in the envelope he expected, but in everything I didn't become because of him. I became honest, sharp, kind, whole. And every word I read that night, every pause before the crowd gasped, every unflinching sentence, it all came from this. From the unmailed letter. From a child who just wanted her father to see her, and an adult who stopped begging to be known. So no, he'll never hold that paper in his hands. But still, I never sent it. But now he's read every word, just not the way he expected. People kept calling what I did revenge. They made comments online, messaged me things like, "That was the most graceful takedown I've ever seen," or, "Your dad got exactly what he deserved." But the funny thing is, that wasn't the plan. I didn't want to ruin him. I didn't want payback. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted truth. I wanted the silence broken, but not with shouting. With clarity. When you grow up in a family built on power plays and hushed tones, you learn quickly that whoever controls the narrative controls everything. My father was a master of that. He never needed to raise his hand. Just his eyebrow. Punishment wasn't loud. It was withdrawal. Disapproval so thick it filled a room. You could be in the middle of a family event, surrounded by cousins and music and food, and still feel like you were choking, just from the way he looked through you. That's what being discarded does. It eats at your sense of worth until you start looking for scraps in every interaction, until you say yes when you want to say no, until you think survival means pleasing a person who treats your voice like a threat. So no, retribution was never the goal, because what he did to me wasn't mine to replicate. It was mine to interrupt. You don't end generational trauma by out-screaming it. You end it by choosing to not become what tried to break you. That night at the gala, I didn't speak with venom. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I exposed. I held it up to the light. I let the silence of the room do the heavy lifting, the same silence he once used to punish me. Power isn't spite. It's timing. It's knowing you're finally unshaken by the games that used to undo you. It's choosing boundaries over battles. In therapy, Miriam once drew a diagram with 3 concentric rings. At the center, she wrote, "Your truth." The next ring was, "Who has earned access to it?" The outer ring, "Everyone else." For too long, I pushed my father into the center. Let him live there, because I thought that's where parents belonged. But not anymore. The truth is, I've come to understand he'll never apologize in the way I once dreamed he might. He won't crawl back with tears. He won't learn my language of healing. That's not who he is, but I no longer need that version of closure. What I have is better. I have distance, I have voice, and I have control over the story he tried to write without me in it. What I reclaimed wasn't about money or property or validation. It was about self-respect, the right to not shrink, and the right to name the thing no one else in the family ever dared say out loud. That love without safety isn't love. That control isn't care, and that you can miss the idea of a father while mourning the reality of who he chose to be. I don't hate him. I don't even think about him most days, but I'll say this. When you stop begging for love, they lose all power. I drove out to the house one last time, not to reclaim it, not to measure its windows and imagine what could have been, just to say goodbye. It was early morning when I pulled up. Mist clung to the ground, soft and shapeless, like some part of the past didn't want to let go. The house stood exactly where I left it, gray now, faded at the edges, like it was holding on too. I didn't walk up to the door. I didn't need to. I just stood at the small stone path, hands in my pockets, and looked. Every piece of that house had a memory wired into it. The fence I stained and restained even when my arms burned. The shed where I labeled boxes for future summers. The lemon trees in the back, I don't even know if they're still alive. My father probably never watered them. I used to imagine bringing my kids here, showing them what I built with my own teenage hands. Now, I don't think I'd even want them to know this place existed. Some houses aren't meant to shelter you forever. They're meant to teach you how to leave. When it was time to make a legal move, I didn't sue. I didn't demand my share or drag him through court. That's what he would have done. I did something quieter, smarter. With Samira's help, I filed a lien, small, clean, public, attached not to ownership but to contribution, to work, to time, to presence. It won't get me money. That was never the point. It gets me the truth, on record. It means that no matter who buys it next, no matter what the paper trail looks like, my name's on the timeline. You can't erase a shadow once you make it visible. And for the first time, I don't want to burn it all down just to prove it mattered to me. Let him have the bricks. Let him keep the drywall and the deed. He never knew what actually held this place up anyway. It was sweat and silence, and a girl too loyal to see. She was just a placeholder. I read somewhere that forgiveness isn't about them. It's about the weight you stop carrying. So, I left the anger there. All of it. Right there on the damp earth between the porch and my footsteps. I didn't take a final photo. Didn't touch the mailbox. I left no trace of my visit, because this time wasn't for nostalgia. This was release. I walked back to the car, turned the key, pulled away, and never looked back. There's a little trail near my apartment. Nothing spectacular. Just a narrow path that winds past overgrown ivy. A few benches, low-hanging trees. I found it during my first year alone, when I needed something, anything, that didn't feel like survival. Now I walk it every Sunday. No headphones, no podcast, just me, the rhythm of my own footsteps and the sound of life moving forward. This time, I had a letter in my coat pocket, but not from my father. This one had no hidden clause, no fine print, no pretense. It was from a publishing house, a small one, local, independent, the kind that cares more about heart than market trends. They wanted to publish my poems, the ones I started writing in that tiny studio apartment, the ones scribbled in the back of grocery receipts, the ones that came out in therapy sessions between tears and revelations, letters that never got mailed, truths I only ever read to myself. That's what they wanted. Not perfection, not polish, just me. The real version, raw, rebuilt, and finally, whole. I ran my fingers over the envelope as I walked. It felt heavier than its weight. It carried the proof that pain can be turned into something real. That silence, when owned, becomes a kind of language you no longer have to be afraid of. I thought about younger me as I walked. 15. Painting fences, thinking I had to work for love. 20. Trying to shrink myself to fit into roles I never asked for. 25. Alone in that apartment. Trying to remember who I was without someone else's voice in my head. And now? Now I was someone who didn't just survive. I made something from the ruins. The things that once buried me now blooming in sentences I could call mine. I'd like to say that everything feels perfect now. It doesn't. There are days I still flinch at sharp tones. Days I wake up afraid of being too much or not enough. But the difference is, I don't stay there. I've learned how to come back to myself. How to speak gently, even when the world tries to be harsh. I don't worry about being invited to family functions. I don't wait for phantom apologies. I don't check his name online. I don't owe the past any more of my present. And that's the definition of peace, I think. Not erasing the story, just letting the ending belong to you. When I got home, I placed the new letter on the table, right where the old one had once sat. That single cruel message he sent. The one that tried to pull me back into silence. It had no power now. It never even belonged in my hands, because I already had everything I needed. Strength, voice, freedom, and more than anything, room to grow. Without someone demanding I shrink, I poured myself tea, opened my laptop, started retyping one of the early poems. The one I used to be afraid was too angry. It wasn't. It was true, and truth has a beauty all its own. So yes, I got a letter. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a beginning. After 3 years of silence, I got a letter, but I already had what I needed.